to the Lewis and Clark Road, the namesake of our museum. Let's start the tour just right over here in the very corner here. You can see all sorts of different things in here, including some mohair chaps, some silver tea set, and the paisley shawl. Now the paisley shawl has a full story to it. You can read all about that when you come through here. But we're gonna just move on because there's a lot to see in here and I don't want this to be a 30-minute long video. You can see all sorts of different things that resulted in the huge fur trade during the 1800s. And you can see why it was such a profitable business for so many people. Because there were so many things that people wanted. We then here have a lot of fur coats. Again, a huge contributor to that because they were very warm for a lot of the North Dakota winters. As well as this chair here. It is not technically called a wheelchair, but I do not recall the name, and I apologize for that. But we will be getting information on that shortly. As we move over here, you can see a seal fur coat, as well as a bearskin coat, which has been dyed green, and then a chest, as well as multiple other jackets in there. And then we'll move on to the last of these cabinets, which holds multiple different guns. Now these were used in the late 1800s and early 1900s, right here in North Dakota. We do actually have some gunpowder in there, right along with them. So we're gonna move over here and we're gonna go this way, which is technically a little backwards, but that's all right. We'll start here. This is a gray wolf. They were very popular in this area. This one was shot in 1950 by Louis Revoyer, and he collected a $100 bounty from cattlemen for this. Because during this time period, gray wolves were a huge problem, to the point that the government put a bounty on any gray wolf that they would bring in. This one was then skinned and tanned, and then later on brought to the museum. Then this is all about the Lewis and Clark journey, so we won't go into it too much because again this is backwards, so this is talking about the end of their journey, a lot of the information there. This is more so the middle of their journey. Here's a copy of the letter that Jefferson actually sent to Congress in order to send Lewis and Clark on their expedition. We also have full information about Thomas Jefferson right over there, the man that wrote our Declaration of Independence, as well as Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, the Lewis and Clark of Lewis and Clark. And then the beginning of their journey. So this is all about the different things that they found on their journey, including the ever so famous bear claw necklace. Now this is in fact a museum produced replica, as it says right there. However, it was missing for many, many years. And it recently surfaced in a museum. You can read all the information about that there. And then this is again a museum recreation of moccasins. Now during this time period, Lewis and Clark oftentimes wore Western shoes, which many of us would know nowadays as dress shoes or Oxfords. They were introduced to moccasins by Sacagawea while they were up in this area, and they traded their Western shoes for a pair of those. Now we're going to move on to here, which was also in this area. This is Fort Mandan. So, doing a lot of research on Fort Mandan, I was commissioned by the museum here in order to create this diorama, a full 2-scale replica of what Fort Mandan would have looked like. Sadly, it is now at the bottom of the river, but you can see a recreation that's built to very similar specs as to what was described in their journals, the same as this, except it's full size and made out of telephone poles. So you can actually walk through that around the Mandan, North Dakota area. This also talks about the Native Americans that live nearby, the Hidatsa tribe, which were living in that general area for protection and for trading with the Westerners. So we'll move on here to Sacagawea. Now Sacagawea, of course, was their guide throughout the North Dakotas. She became very, very famous with her young son, Tom, with her husband, Charbonneau, who later had a part of North Dakota named after him, Charbonneau, North Dakota, which is now a ghost town. We do have many parts of it here at our museum. So you can read all about her story and the complications between the Hidatsa tribe and the Mandan people that Sakakawea was a part of. Now this is our Native American exhibit. Now a lot of the clothing and the headdress as well as this painting are replicas that are produced by Native Americans of that tribe. We tried to keep it as authentic as possible, but some things really don't heed to the tests of time. But these tools in here are authentic. They are hammer heads and axe heads that were made out of stones. And then the Native American that you can see here with their teepee, which is not technically correct for this area, was originally used for the large diorama that was in this very room that sadly was ravaged by mice and that sort of thing, and thus was removed during the remodel of this room. But moving on from that, we have all about napping. So napping is the process of making an arrowhead by chipping away at very brittle stones that can break off, but they're very, very hard. So the harder something is, the more brittle it is, just like glass. And so they would break it off with very hard stones in order to bring it to an arrowhead. So we have the entire process documented right down here in step-by-step instructions. If you do so decide to use these instructions, the Lewis and Clark Trail Museum is not liable for any injuries you do incur when you are doing this process. Now, we are going to look up a little bit here for one of our more interesting objects here at the museum. These are two bucks that are forever locked in combat. Now, they got enough force in their fight to connect together. Their antlers actually ended up getting stuck together, and they eventually died that way. So they were found in this way, stuck together by their antlers. They were then taken into a taxidermist, and they had to be stuffed in this very way. In fact, we had to hang them up this way because there's no way to remove these two from each other. Now we move on to a couple of our other stuffed friends. This is a squirrel stuffed by a man named Gary, and I don't remember his last name at the moment, but he did most of the taxidermies that we have here. I misread that at the beginning of working here, and I thought that he had named the squirrel Gary, so I have since named him Gary the Squirrel. I have tried to convince my boss to allow me to put a fez hat on his head, but she will not let me. But nonetheless, Gary the Squirrel is wonderful. Then we have all the different boats that were used on the Missouri River. You can see a keel boat, a bull boat, a moose-skin boat. So these were all different types of boats that were used. And then if you look up top, you can of course see a pheasant, some grouse, geese, ducks, all sorts of different wildlife that are still in this area. And many of them were first documented by Lewis and Clark. And then of course you can see here skulls and remnants for bighorn sheep that were actually in this area, which is kind of surprising to think about. And then these are some fossilized coral, some fossilized bone, that sort of thing you can look through here. And then we move on to some leaves that were forever imprinted into different types of stone. And then another one of our most interesting things. So these are mammoth teeth. And this one here is a molar for a mammoth. It weighs approximately 12.5 pounds. Now this one was found 35 feet below ground level. And it's roughly 12,000 years old, if I remember correctly. Now, you have to think that they had tons of different teeth. They had like 6 and 7 rows of teeth. What I mean by that is not like sharp rows, but instead they would have their teeth and then they'd have 6 sets underneath because they kept losing their teeth. In fact, that's why us humans have wisdom teeth that come in is because we would oftentimes lose our teeth. So you have to think each of these weighing 12.5 pounds after being petrified. So it would be quite a bit more dense when it was still living tissue. So it would be probably around 15 pounds per tooth. They had a full mouth of teeth times 6. That is an immense amount of weight just inside their jaw, and it shows just how huge of an animal that mammoth was. And in fact, all of the information here that has been written on these 2 pieces right here and here were written by somebody that worked here as a high schooler. He eventually, this sparked his interest in mammoths, and now he's working with the company that is trying to bring back the mammoth, which is something really interesting that I didn't know until recently when he came back through the museum to see what all we had changed. Now, the last thing that we're going to go through on this tour, well, second to last thing, is about the Lewis and Clark Bridge. Now, it was what brought us to Williston. Sadly, it has since been torn down, but we do have the original sign here. And a couple of pictures. The picture, sadly, was curled up for a long period of time, so we do have some Native American hammerheads that are holding it down for you to be able to view it properly. But yeah, you can see full pictures of what it looked like throughout the process. And the final thing that we're going to look at here is the extermination of the buffalo here in our buffalo. So these buffalo skulls were actually found in this area, and it's because for a long time they would kill as many buffalo as they possibly could, and so their bones were just scattered everywhere, including all of these skulls that are around this central piece that we couldn't even fit inside of this one. There's so much more to see in here that I can't get into without taking up a ton of your time. But I do hope that you enjoyed this small miniature tour of the Lewis and Clark Road here at the Lewis and Clark Trail Museum.